Over the course of the next several years, Los Angeles will be host to the World Cup, and then the Super Bowl, and then the Olympics. With this rebuilding effort needing to take place, is LA going to be ready for all of those global events?
My humble position, and it's not just being naively optimistic, that only reinforces the imperative moving quickly, doing in the spirit of collaboration and cooperation, and all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team looking at reimagining LA 2.0.
We're already reimagining. We got a Marshall Plan. This is the favorite of these people. They love the Marshall Plan and the Manhattan Project and the Hoover Dam. We're sitting here, it's 2025, and a large part of our political elite operates as a kind of empty-headed zombie of the greatest hits of the 20th century. And that's what's on display here. It's this, we're going to centrally plan our way to a better, brighter future. Yes, we're already laying the foundations for Los Angeles 2.0. Why in the world would anyone trust you to redesign the city that you allowed to burn? Who's buying this? This is the heart of the problem. But we know what this is. We have seen this over and over again.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
Now, it's not clear when you've been in leadership in a state as long as Gavin Newsom has, what are these secret special plans that he's had that he's just been waiting to share with the electorate for how to reimagine the world, how to redesign California society. The reality is he doesn't have this. He's this.
See me, Alpac, for Alpac's used cars. No song and dance here.
No song and dance here. His song and dance is communism, a just slightly refined version of a much more crude communist vision. This is a central planning vision. It is the vision of the anointed, as Thomas Sowell likes to say. These are the people who believe that they have been given the path forward. That's why forward is often a slogan in far-left politics. Forward, onward, it's clear where we need to go next. It's the 2.0, it's Los Angeles 2.0, it's America 2.0. Gavin Newsom, with his song and dance and his carefully choreographed, perfectly synchronized hand movements, is really like the T-1000 upgrade model of plain old radical Marxist governance. What do I mean by that? Well, of course, California is sort of the Terminator state, right? We had the actual Terminator, Arnold Schwarzenegger, as the governor not all that long ago. And in the movie T2, the T-1000 model was the liquid metal that could transform into any shape, take the shape of any other person, could sort of move through the fire and push through the bars of the cell to escape any trap set for him. That's Gavin Newsom. And one of the things that people like Gavin Newsom are smart enough to do is avoid the kinds of mistakes that more nakedly radical politicians like Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles, did. She, of course, is transparently a radical communist, but don't take my word for it. Let's just look back at good old local news coverage, shall we?
President Obama's historic visit to Cuba. Was this the right move after decades of isolating the island nation, or did he offer legitimacy to an autocratic government it doesn't deserve? We talk with Congresswoman Karen Bass of the House Foreign Relations Committee, who took part in the Cuban trip and has long advocated for diplomatic ties with the Castro regime.
And let me just say this real quick. I don't think the sanctions against Cuba have been particularly effective, right? I mean, the Cuban leadership hasn't changed. So on their own grounds, I think the sanctions against Cuba have been a failure. That being said, this is a communist regime that had missiles from our mortal enemy, the Soviet Union, placed on it not that long ago. So the politics of Cuba is complicated, but that doesn't excuse what comes next.
Good morning and welcome to News Conference. With us, the Honorable Karen Bass, member of the U.S. House of Representatives from the 37th District of California, all the way from Century City to South L.A., member of House Judiciary and House Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
And just recently back from Cuba, where you went with the President of the United States on that historic visit. Tell us about that. First of all, you had been there before, more often than anybody else had from the delegation.
Well, it was amazing to be there in a historical moment. First president to visit the island in 88 years.
And you had been there on plenty of occasions before. Why was this so meaningful specifically for you?
Well, one, because I actually always had a problem and a disagreement that I feel as a U.S. citizen, I should be able to go anywhere in the world I choose. I didn't like the fact that my government restricted me from going to Cuba.
And so I went 8 times.
Some would say this was a little too early to legitimize an autocratic government that does not foster basic human rights.
Well, if you just think about it, think of who we have relationships with around the world. If we're going to judge leaders who we have relationships with around the world, we wouldn't have relationships with too many countries.
You know, I like to give credit where credit's due, right? So, sure, fine. The U.S. has done all kinds of bad stuff. But it's one thing to be a reasonable critic. It's another thing to adopt a radical destructive ideology. And in the case of Karen Bass, that is exactly what she's done. It wasn't simply, I should be able to go wherever I want. I'm going to go. And then I'm going to go again and again and again and again and again and again. Let's dig a little deeper into this because you don't need to go to fringe right-wing sources to understand what's going on here. The Atlantic magazine, covered this. When Karen Bass went to work in Castro's Cuba in 1973, Bass, who's now a potential Biden VP pick, traveled to Cuba with the Venceramos Brigade. Quote, I didn't have any illusions that the people of Cuba had the same freedoms I did, she said. This is just from the top of it. The article goes on to explain that she was very much enmeshed in this radical group that favored Castro's communism and wanted to bring it to the United States and bring Americans to and from to, get us on board with the program. Let's hear from one of the brigadiers himself.
The Venceramos Brigade, which has been in solidarity with Cuba since 1969, is currently the oldest U.S.-based solidarity group with Cuba.
And just to be clear, this is not a solidarity group with Cuba, as in the Cuban people. This is a solidarity group with the Cuban communists, with Castro and his regime.
We do voluntary labor and bring material aid to Cuba and bring Americans to Cuba to learn about the Cuban Revolution, to build stronger connections there, especially to then bring those connections back to the United States and, and help.
Yeah, just to bring possible future vice presidents to Cuba to learn about the revolution and bring it back to the United States. But this is what this is. This is who these people are.
Build our movements here.
Build our movement here. So, good old Wikipedia lists Karen Bass at the top of the list of notable brigadistas. But it's not just Karen Bass. Former mayor of Los Angeles, Antonio Villaraigosa, is also a notable brigadista. And again, because I want to be an honest broker for everyone here at Dad Saves America, I figured let's just take a second look. We clicked in and you find this New Yorker article highlighting it. Villaraigosa visited Cuba with the Venceramos Brigade, a radical group. So these are confirmed things. These are things that these people are proud of. Lest you think that this was sort of, the youthful radicalism of like a Berkeley grad that just wants to change the world for the better and isn't really sure. This is an apologist for communism. Here she is at the passing of Fidel Castro. And I think it's important to read what she had to say about the murderous dictator in Cuba. As Cuba begins 9 days of mourning, I wish to express my condolences to the Cuban people and the family of Fidel Castro. The passing of the Comandante El Jefe is a great loss to the people of Cuba. I hope together our two nations will continue on the new path of support and collaboration with one another and continue in the new direction of diplomacy. Now, a few years back, a grandchild of Fidel Castro got into a little trouble, or at least I should say got highlighted, for posting pictures on Instagram of him gallivanting around the world, living the high life on yachts and going to fancy restaurants. As is often the case, these autocrats, like the Castros, end up quite wealthy themselves, sometimes into the billions, in fact, while decrying the evil theft of the mighty capitalists who steal from workers. One can't help but see the echoes of Gavin Newsom dining at the French Laundry while he's locked down the entire society in a totalitarian hell. This is the force at work. This is the sort of utopian ideology that makes its way from academia, frankly, into governance and into doing things like trying to keep the water hydrants running. So it turns out that Karen Bass's connections to radical communists probably scuttled her chances of being the vice presidential pick. The fact that she was even in consideration is shocking. But this points to why Gavin Newsom is sort of the perfection of this sort of elite aristocratic model. He believes the same stuff, but he's smart enough and has been instructed well enough to avoid making these kinds of crude mistakes. And so we are left with the slick talker who hasn't gone to Cuba like Karen Bass, but believes all the same stuff. And so with that in mind, let's listen to his vision for California now, this opportunity that he's so excited to take advantage of through this lens.
And all that opportunity and that pride and spirit that comes from not just hosting those three iconic games and venues, but also the opportunity, I think, to rebuild at the same time. And that's why we're already organizing a Marshall Plan. We already have a team of looking and reimagining LA 2.0, and we're making sure everyone's included, not just the folks on the coast, people here that were ravaged by this disaster.
Already got the plan. Already got the blueprint for the smart city, Los Angeles 2.0, the complete reconstituting of the social order. Why do I think this plan has been on the shelf?
You just said you're organizing a Marshall Plan for the rebuilding of California. What is that Marshall Plan? Tell us about this Marshall Plan.
We're just starting to lay out. I mean, we're still fighting these fires, so we're already talking.
I guess, again, should I criticize someone for uncomfortable laughter? I do it all the time. Yes, I should. I'm not trying to reconstruct entire cities.
Talking to city leaders, we're already talking to civic leaders, we're already talking to business leaders and nonprofits, we're talking to labor leaders. We're starting to organize how we can put together a collection of individuals on philanthropy for recovery, how we can organize the region, how we can make sure that we are seeking federal assistance for the Olympics more broadly, but also federal assistance for the recovery efforts.
So you hear all this talk of all these pieces being brought together in just a week. Just a week. All of this, every single facet of society is apparently being brought to the table to reconstruct Los Angeles. That's the same amount of time that the governor and the mayor had to respond to the National Weather Service warning that Los Angeles was at high risk of catastrophic fire due to the winds. And one just has to wonder, could it be that it's just convenient that people who believe in radical social transformation, who read Leninist Marxists and spout their talking points, often just with a couple layers of fine-tuning, manage to be so visionary about how they're going to reconstruct society, but can't keep reservoirs right next to the fire from being empty for a full year, which is what actually happened, that there was an actual millions of gallon reservoir, as we heard from Michael Shellenberger, left empty, that may have radically improved the outcomes of this event. I don't know who's buying this. I really don't. But it goes so much deeper than just plans for this new vision of Los Angeles 2.0. These people, this mindset really believes in fundamentally re-architecting your mind.
We can galvanize the community with folks that love this community to really develop a mindset so that at scale, we're dealing with the scope of this tragedy and responding to it at scale.
That's not just word salad. One of the things that's happened, especially with Kamala Harris, another sort of Californian who failed her way up into disaster, we have been hit with word salads. But you need to listen to what's being said. This is a cousin of imagining what could be unburdened by what has been. So if the Palisades have been unburdened by their structures and their society, and now we get to imagine what could be unburdened by that, this is the reimagining of people in the eyes of socialist man, bringing together the community to create a new mindset. Who in Los Angeles or anywhere in America thinks that Gavin Newsom knows how to re-architect their mindset? I don't want you anywhere near my mindset. But that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people who fundamentally don't think you have the right ideas, have the right mindset. You don't have the right desires. What do you want, a car with a V8 engine? No, you'll drive an electric. And by the way, don't charge it on the weekends. That is the vision being put forward by Newsom and by the more crudely radical people on the left, on the radical left, like Karen Bass. This has to be rejected.
If you like this clip, you should check out the full video and all the other great content we've got at Dad Saves America. So be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring that bell so you won't miss our new stuff as it drops each week.